The first raindrops of spring had just begun to fall over the city, soft and hesitant, as if nature itself was testing its own rhythm. In a small, sunlit cafe tucked between the busy streets, a young woman sat alone by the window. Her chestnut hair caught the pale light, glimmering like strands of copper, and her eyes, deep and reflective, followed the dance of rain across the glass. She carried the quiet weight of 1,000 unspoken thoughts, the kind that linger in the air like a delicate perfume, familiar yet elusive. Across the room, he entered, a man with a presence that drew the eye, though it was quiet, understated. There was a certain hesitation in his step, the sort of careful movement that suggested a man not used to rushing, someone who savored the small moments that others overlooked. He ordered coffee, lingering near the counter, as though the world itself had slowed for him. The rain intensified, tapping against the glass in a rhythm that seemed to echo the pulse of both their hearts. And then, in that fragile, fleeting instant, their eyes met, not in a casual glance, but in a sudden recognition, as if the universe had conspired to align two lives at the precise moment they were meant to collide. She noticed the faint smile he offered, gentle and tentative, a quiet invitation into a story neither of them had yet imagined. The hours passed unnoticed, and the cafe seemed to shrink, enclosing them in a bubble of warmth, the hum of conversation fading into the background. Though they spoke only a few words, it felt as if they had communicated in an unspoken language, one composed of glances, sighs, and subtle gestures. When he finally left, the rain had stopped, leaving the city washed in the soft glow of early evening. She lingered at the window, watching his retreating figure disappear into the shimmering streets. Something had begun, delicate and uncertain, yet undeniable, like the first fragile bloom of spring that survives even the harshest frost. Neither knew what the future held, yet both carried a quiet certainty that their lives had shifted in that singular moment. The city around them seemed unchanged, yet inside, hearts had awakened to a possibility neither had dared to dream of before. Days passed, each carrying the lingering echo of that first encounter. She found herself revisiting the memory of his gentle smile, the subtle warmth that had seemed to radiate even through a crowded cafe. Every corner of the city, every familiar streetlight, seemed to whisper his name, a quiet reminder that life had shifted in ways both fragile and profound. He, too, could not shake the feeling of her presence. The brief conversation, the fleeting moment by the window, it had taken root in his mind, growing silently, like a delicate vine seeking sunlight. He found himself returning to that cafe, not out of habit, but driven by a sense of hope that perhaps fate could offer a second chance, a continuation of what had begun. When they met again, it was neither by accident nor by plan. Their eyes locked, recognition blooming into something more tangible, more urgent. This time, there were no hesitations. The conversation flowed like a gentle river, each word carrying the weight of curiosity, of quiet fascination. She spoke of books she loved, of the small wonders of everyday life. He listened, rapt, his own stories spilling forth as naturally as a stream breaking through ice. In the midst of their shared laughter and subtle smiles, there was a growing awareness that something extraordinary was unfolding. The city around them faded, and the world seemed to exist only in the space between their words, in the gentle cadence of breaths, in the warmth that lingered in a hand brushing against another. Yet, life had a quiet way of testing hearts. Outside the cocoon of that cafe, obligations, responsibilities, and fleeting uncertainties pressed in. She carried her own fears, whispers of past disappointments that made her cautious. He bore the weight of subtle hesitations, remnants of a life spent carefully observing, but rarely leaping. Still, even amidst the delicate tension, a spark had been ignited, unseen by anyone else, yet blazing quietly within. It was a promise without words, a silent vow that something beautiful could grow if nurtured with patience and care. And in that recognition, there was hope, the kind that stirs the soul and lingers long after the moment has passed, urging hearts forward towards something neither fully understood but both deeply desired. As the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the city in amber and rose, they parted once more, each carrying a silent question. Would the fragile connection survive the unseen currents of life, or would it be lost before it had a chance to bloom? Weeks turned into a subtle rhythm, and the cafe became their quiet sanctuary. Conversations stretched for hours, laughter mingling with silences that spoke volumes. Yet beneath the gentle glow of growing intimacy, shadows lingered, small, unspoken doubts that neither wanted to name. She carried a quiet hesitancy, a tender fear that attachment might lead to loss. Past relationships, fleeting and imperfect, had left traces in her heart, a soft ache that whispered caution. Each glance from him stirred warmth, but also a whisper of doubt. Could someone so vivid, so present, truly belong in her life? He, on the other hand, struggled with restraint. He felt drawn to her in ways both overwhelming and subtle. There was an intensity in his attention, a longing that occasionally frightened him. Though he wanted to bridge the distance between them, he feared moving too quickly, of shattering the fragile beauty of their connection. Then, one rainy evening, a moment arrived that neither could have anticipated. She received a message, one that carried echoes of her past, an unexpected call from someone who had once held her heart. The words awakened memories she had tried to tuck away, memories that whispered of mistakes, of love lost too soon. She sat in the cafe, staring at her cup, the warmth of coffee forgotten. His presence was beside her, a quiet anchor, yet he sensed the sudden withdrawal in her eyes. Her fingers trembled slightly as she placed the phone down, and he reached out instinctively, hesitating only for a heartbeat before letting his hand rest near hers. It was a test of patience, of trust. Neither spoke of the sudden intrusion, but the air shifted, carrying an unspoken tension that clung to their connection like mist. The silence between them became a bridge of emotions, curiosity, fear, and hope interwoven so intricately that it was impossible to separate one from another. By the time the rain had ceased and the city shimmered under the glow of streetlights, they left the cafe together, yet with hearts slightly heavier. Both sensed that love, even the most tender and promising, was not immune to uncertainty. And yet, within that challenge, there was a fragile, persistent truth. A connection so rare, so profoundly felt, could endure even when shadows fell between hearts. The first real test had arrived, and it demanded something more than laughter or fleeting joy. It demanded trust, patience, and the courage to face the unknown together. The days that followed were a delicate dance between closeness and distance. They met often, yet each encounter carried the quiet weight of unspoken questions. She wondered if her past would always cast shadows over her happiness. He wondered if his own fears would ever allow him to fully surrender to the intensity of what they shared. One afternoon, under the golden warmth of an early summer sun, they wandered through a park where trees stretched like guardians over the winding paths. The air was heavy with the scent of blossoms, and the world seemed suspended, a gentle pause between one heartbeat and the next. In that suspended moment, their hands brushed, fingers entwining with an ease that felt both inevitable and comforting. But life, as it often does, demanded a choice. A professional opportunity arose for him, a project that would take him to another country for months. It was a dream he had nurtured for years, one that could shape his future in ways he had long imagined. Yet the thought of leaving her, of stepping away from the fragile bloom of their connection, stirred a tension in his chest that words could not contain. She felt the weight of his impending absence acutely, a silent fear that the distance could erode what had grown so carefully between them. But beneath the fear, a quiet clarity emerged. She realized that love was not merely about proximity. It was about trust, resilience, and a willingness to embrace uncertainty together. The evening before his departure, They sat side by side on a quiet bench overlooking the river, the city lights reflecting like scattered jewels across the water. No words were needed at first. They shared a gaze, long and steady, where gratitude, longing, and a deep tenderness mingled. Then, in a voice barely above a whisper, he spoke, not of promises that might falter, but of a commitment to return, to nurture what had begun, and to allow love to grow even across distance. She nodded, her own voice catching on the edge of emotion, understanding that true connection did not depend solely on presence, but on the unwavering belief in one another. Their fingers lingered together, a silent pledge that neither time nor distance could easily unravel. As he departed the following morning, leaving her with the soft echo of his touch and the memory of his gaze, she realized that love, like life, demanded courage. And in that courage lay the promise of something extraordinary, a bond that could weather uncertainty, grow stronger in longing, and ultimately illuminate the path toward an inevitable reunion. Months passed, each day a quiet testament to resilience, trust, and the subtle power of love. Letters, messages, and fleeting phone calls became lifelines, connecting hearts across the distance that tested their devotion. Each word carried warmth, each shared memory a bridge spanning the miles. Though separated by geography, their connection deepened, enriched by longing and the anticipation of reunion. Finally, the day arrived when the distance would end. He returned, stepping into the familiar streets of the city with a heart full of hope and a quiet determination. The air itself seemed to hum with anticipation, and as he approached the cafe where it all began, he saw her waiting, framed by the soft glow of afternoon sunlight. Time seemed to pause. She rose, breath catching, and their eyes met with a recognition so profound it transcended words. The months of uncertainty melted away, leaving only the truth they had nurtured. Love, patient and steadfast, had endured. They walked together through the city, the rhythm of their steps in harmony, each moment a celebration of the journey they had shared. She smiled, a gentle radiance lighting her face, and he felt a quiet awe at the depth of emotion he had found in her presence. No past shadows, no fleeting fears could diminish the reality of what they now knew to be certain. Their hearts belonged irrevocably to one another. Under a sky painted in the soft blush of twilight, they paused at the river's edge. The water mirrored the colors of the sky, rippling with light, much like their hearts, which had learned to endure, to hope, and ultimately to trust. He took her hands in his, steady and sure, and in that moment, no distance, no fear, no hesitation existed. There was only the unspoken promise of forever, a love forged in moments of quiet connection, strengthened by trials, and now flourishing in its purest form. As they stood together, the city alive around them, yet seemingly distant, the world felt infinite, yet intimate, crafted perfectly for two hearts that had found one another. And in the delicate hush of twilight, they knew that love, in its most profound and enduring form, was not merely a meeting of hearts, but the courage to hold on, to trust, and to bloom together, no matter what storms might pass. The first raindrops of spring had returned, soft and glistening, and together they watched as life renewed itself all around them, just as their love had, undaunted, unbroken, and eternal.